across America have spent the last year doing our best to avoid going out, missing out on spending precious time with family and friends, and wearing a mask when we did go out to keep the people around us safe. Some of us did this because we thought it was the right thing to do, while others did it because their state or local governments or private businesses made them do it. But some Americans were never really obligated to do any of these things because they live in Florida, a state where Republicans have, from the beginning of the pandemic, acted like COVID-19 did not exist, even as thousands of people were dying in that state. Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz famously mocked the severity of the outbreak, wearing a gas mask on the floor of the House of Representatives. In an unrelated story breaking tonight, Gaetz is reportedly under investigation over a possible sexual relationship with a 17-year-old girl. We'll speak to one of the reporters who broke that story in just a little bit. But first, we begin tonight with Florida's lack of a COVID prevention strategy. In fact, the state's Republican governor, Ron Desantis, who refused to enact a statewide mask mandate throughout the pandemic, bucking the decisions of more liberal states like, Mississippi and Texas, is moving to overturn local mask mandates and basically doing everything he can to make the people of Florida even less safe. And for those of you thinking, well, I'm sorry to hear that, but I don't live in Florida, the New York Times reports, quote, scientists view Florida, the state furthest along in lifting restrictions, reopening society and welcoming tourists, as a bellwether for the nation. If recent trends there are any indication, the rest of the country may be in trouble. And that is because, thanks in large part to the Republicans running the state, Florida itself looks like it is facing a new COVID surge. The Times says over the past week, the state has averaged nearly 5,000 cases per day, an increase of 8% from its average 2 weeks earlier. B.1.1.7, the more contagious variant first identified in Britain, is also rising exponentially in Florida, where it accounts for a greater proportion of total cases than in any other state. Miami Beach was forced to impose an emergency 8 p.m. curfew last week after thousands of tourists flocked to the city for spring break. But despite all this, Governor DeSantis is insisting the state is open for business, no matter what. Yesterday, DeSantis signed a COVID-19 liability protection bill to protect businesses, governments, and healthcare providers from lawsuits. Today, he vowed to ban so-called vaccine passports that businesses could use to confirm their patrons were vaccinated against COVID-19. Meanwhile, Yahoo News reports, quote, new research published earlier this month in the American Journal of Public Health argues that Florida is undercounting the number of people who died from COVID-19 by thousands of cases, casting new doubt on claims that Governor Ron DeSantis navigated the coronavirus pandemic successfully. So, to summarize, COVID is getting worse. The governor is actively taking steps to make people less safe and businesses less responsible. And now it looks like they've been lying about how bad things really are. Perhaps Governor DeSantis was a bit hasty when he said this last May.
You got a lot of people in your profession who waxed poetically for weeks and weeks about how Florida was going to be just like New York. Wait 2 weeks, Florida's going to be next. Just like Italy, wait 2 weeks. Well, hell, we're 8 weeks away from that, and it hasn't happened.
Of course, that take didn't age too well. And maybe some people might also want to rethink headlines like this from just 12 days ago that reads, how Ron DeSantis won the pandemic. Yeah. Several times on this show, my good friend Chris Hayes described the Trump administration as objectively pro-COVID because of its policies that seem to help the virus spread. But in the post-Trump era, Ron DeSantis, who a big chunk of Republicans at CPAC recently said should be the next GOP presidential nominee if Trump doesn't run again, he's clearly Trump's mini-me when it comes to handling the coronavirus. He's as reckless and anti-science as Trump was, and that makes him as popular as ever, with a conservative base that does not seem to care about mass death in this country. The Florida governor cares more about businesses being open and safe from litigation than Americans or Floridians getting sick and dying. And so Ron DeSantis is objectively pro-COVID too. He's doing everything he can to help the virus while doing everything he can to hinder democracy. And I say that because after Georgia Republicans passed a new law making it harder to vote in their state, Florida Republicans, supported by Ron DeSantis, are pushing similar legislation, including a provision that would effectively ban giving voters in line water, something that Republican Senator Lindsey Graham admitted he did not understand. Although it's become clear that Governor Desantis has no problem supporting an agenda that hurts the people who live in his own state.